Good morning from Cornwall. I'm Jane, the Cornish Knitter, and today I'm going to talk a little bit about the Cornish Gansey. I've always wanted to knit a traditional Cornish Gansey, and 2025 is the year I'm going to do it. So if you're interested in learning a little bit more about the Gansey and my thoughts about it, and a wonderful poem that was sent to me too, do give us a watch, a listen, and please like and subscribe. So as many of you know, I live in Falmouth. It's been my home for most of my life. It's a beautiful place to live. We're by the sea. I'm here by the Greenbank Hotel in Falmouth, just down from where I live. And between Christmas and New Year, I shared with you my thoughts about knitting a traditional Cornish Gansey. It's been on my to-do list for forever, and this is the year I'm going to do it. Now, anybody that's ever contemplated knitting a Gansey or had a go at it will tell you it is quite a long haul. I realise my glasses are on my head again. Need sunglasses today, so it's a beautiful February day, so I thought it was an ideal day to film. Yes, so there is a long haul. It's a really dense garment, and it's an outerwear, so you need to knit it on tiny needles. There's quite a bit of stocking stitch in it. There's a design elements because there are very few patterns out there to follow, and it was something that I found quite daunting, but it's been on my to-do list for ages, and I thought, well, this year, in my quest to live more intentionally, I thought it was the ideal year to actually start this project. And I know from your comments that many of you too felt the same. So this video today is not about my life in general. This is very much about the Gansey and my Gansey journey or intentions. A little bit about the history of and the relation of Cornwall to the sort of traditional seafaring Gansey. I mean, obviously Cornwall is a county that's virtually surrounded by sea. We have a rich maritime history here, and particularly here in Falmouth where I live, there is an amazing link to the maritime history. But the link with wool goes back hundreds of years for Cornwall. One of our market towns in Liskeard, if we go back over the years, over 2/3 of the population were employed in the wool industry, you know, the spinning, the weaving, the making of garments, before it became industrialised. This was all done by hand, and particularly by the women in the communities and the children. It was a way that they could secure an income, and it was a way that they could so the women and children of these communities in Liskeard saw this as a booming cottage industry and a way to support their families. So they were so fast at knitting. They would knit on really long steel metal pins with a knitting belt which secured one of their pins, and they would knit at such a speed, and they would export those sweaters and their wool and all the garments that they made far and wide across the globe. And that's where it sort of links to Falmouth as well, because Falmouth is a historical naval port with a history that sort of stretches back over time, and Falmouth has got the third largest natural harbour in the world, and it's the deepest, so it allows the ships to come in. And for many years back in time, it was the place where the packet ships would come in, hence the local paper still to this day is called the Falmouth Packet. But the packet ships used to come in and they would transport the mail across the world, so this is where the mail would come in and out of the country. Obviously it was replaced in time with when industrialisation came, and other forms of transport were able to transport mail across the country, but this is the original way it came in. And Falmouth, once that sort of industry started to die down, then the Falmouth Docks was born, and it became a place where ships would come in and get repaired, and the Royal Navy and other ships would come into the docks and seek safe harbour during stormy times. And we also get, through the summer we get goodness me, about 60 cruise ships in between March and October. Because of the depth of the harbour, they can come and safely dock here. So the history of Falmouth and its links to maritime has been really strong over the centuries. And my own family's link to the history, maritime history, has been really strong too. My mum is one of 9 children born here in Falmouth. And her father, my granddad, Cecil Timmins, was the tugboat master here out in the harbour, would help the boats come in, a very proud fisherman and seaman, and you know, his whole joy was taking his family out on small boats. So my mum's childhood, they grew up sort of mucking around on the boats and going out on the water. It was part of their everyday life. And of my 5 uncles, I think virtually all of them owned boats, and 2 of them were on the lifeboat, and my uncle Barry actually became a lifeboat coxswain. So he was in sort of the leader on the lifeboat for a number of years and was involved in many really big rescues off the sea here, and that tradition has continued on because my nephew Jamie is on the lifeboat to this day, and both my nephews are active sailors, so sort of the maritime thread runs deep within the family. I mean, the Gansey was traditionally workwear. It was worn by the seafarers as they went about their business, and it was a functional garment. It was knitted with the purpose of work in mind. However, they were knitted, they were seen as sort of garments that fishermen could use anywhere, so it wasn't uncommon to see them going into church wearing their Ganseys as their Sunday best as well as they visited church, because it was such a part of who they were. Traditionally, the Gansey is knit in a 5-ply wool, worsted spun, so it's a tight twist, which is part of what creates that density in the fabric. And it was usually navy as the colour, and navy was there for a reason. The navy, obviously, on a new jumper would be dark navy and bright, and you would be able to denote when it was a new sweater. But over time and exposure to the weather and the elements, the sweater would fade, and it would fade out from navy to a lighter blue to a grey. And part of the construction of a Gansey is that the front and the back are identical, so that when these working people, seafarers, when they sort of have been using their Gansey for a long time, if the front started to get more faded or damaged, or it got caught on sort of hooks or ripped, they could easily turn it around and use the back as the front, and you wouldn't notice a difference. So that they presented as a really sort of smart front way. So, as I said, traditionally knitted in a 5-ply worsted navy yarn on 2 to 2.5 millimetre needles to get that really dense, tight fabric. And so it was a major challenge, you know, to knit one of these things. And most seafaring areas, maritime areas around the UK coast, and I know in other countries, because a number of you messaged me about it, they have their own traditions around these maritime jumpers, so it's not unique to Cornwall. What is unique to Cornwall is probably the style. So the style of Cornwall. And apologies, I've got a lady walking her dog nearby making quite a lot of noise, so I hope you can hear me over her voice. There are sort of a number of books that sort of record the history of the Gansey, and this one in particular, which was by Mary Wright, which has been republished on a number of occasions, really tells the story of the Gansey here in Cornwall. It does contain some knitting patterns, but they are more the designs that you can use. So traditionally the designs were knits, pearls, cables, and they were there to denote they were meant to represent different places. So many villages or fishing areas had their own design that you could build into your Gansey, and that's what made your Gansey quite unique. So you would build in these patterns and designs to denote what was personal to you. So I have got some examples of Ganseys here. So this is a traditional Gansey. Hopefully you can see this is a beautifully knitted Gansey, and this pattern goes all over the sweater. It has a number of cables and this sort of diamond design. The sun is making it difficult for you to see. They're always drop shouldered, and this design carries on to the sleeve. It has a traditional ribbed sleeve and hem. This is a man's one, but it's got a deep hem on it, which has means that the sweater stays in place. The neckline is a sort of traditional neckline, which is a rib neckline with a slight which has a slight frill at the top. This one here has the traditional sort of saddle shoulder, which has got like an extra sort of piece of fabric here. This was in to actually help with movement and construct and sort of being able to use the sweater practically. And I will show you it on another one, but it also has the traditional sort of gusset in the underarm, which is, there we are, there, which you can see the diamond reflected in the sun, which again aided movement. Men being sort of broader across the shoulders, they needed to be able to move their arms, haul the fish in. Traditionally the sweaters had shorter sleeves because the men didn't want to run the risk of them getting caught in any way, or caught in the rigging that went out to sea and then maybe flip them over the edge. So quite often Ganseys had much shorter arms so that they didn't run, and obviously if you're gutting fish and things, you wouldn't want that splashing all over your sweater and carrying that smell around with you all the time. So this is a beautiful sort of example of a sort of traditional Gansey in the navy, but you can do it in other colours. So this is another beautiful example, and you can see from this the front and the back are identical. You can't tell the difference. There's no short rows. So this is done in a beautiful pink. Again, cables are quite prominent, a different sort of design. The pattern does go onto the sleeve. This is a shorter sleeved one, so on me it sort of comes to about here. Interestingly, the bottom of it is done in this is the Guernsey cast on, I believe, or Channel Islands cast on, I believe, and it is done in a really neat garter stitch with a lovely bit of alternative rib here with a split hem, and then that design goes up. There is a sort of way to denote this is knitted on circular needles, but there is a seam going up the side, which sort of, as you're knitting it, a lot of people put in or have a pattern going down the side seam, excuse me, got the hiccups, so that you can tell when you're knitting in the round, when you're sort of, because it is such a sort of long laborious project, it sort of gives you motivation probably to carry on. And this one is knitted by Bronwyn, one of the people that's part of our flock and who comes into our Stitchers meetup. And she's knitted this on a slightly larger gauge for her husband Alan, but following the traditional Gansey lines. So in terms of pattern design, the patterns were handed down from families to families, so there are very few of them written up, and that's why it is quite a challenge, because you do have to think about what the design's going to look like, what elements you're going to put in. So for mine, what I'm doing is I knitted a gauge swatch. So I knitted one and I wasn't overly happy with how it came out in terms of, so I knitted this on 2.75 needles, So this is the colour I'm knitting my Gansey in. Again, that's probably better. I knitted the gauge slightly larger than I needed it, as you do with the gauge. And the ideal stitch count is 32 stitches to 10 centimetres or 4 inches. And when I looked at the fabric and I looked at these sweaters here, I realised that it wasn't dense enough. So I've started knitting another sample on smaller needles. So I'm going down to 2.25s to try and get that really dense, heavy fabric that I want. I want it to be an outer garment. So I'm going to use some graph paper and think about the design elements that I'm going to use. So what I'm looking at is a split hem. I really like this version. I'm going to copy the concept of this version. I think this is really beautiful. So I like the split hem with potentially either a moss stitch or a garter stitch start. I'm looking, traditionally they're knitted with about 6 inches of ease, so about 15 centimetres. I potentially might have a little bit more ease. I want it to be a garment that I could put a couple of other things underneath and then not have to worry about anything on top of it. My pattern, so then it's going to be stocking stitch, but I am going to do a cable down the side. And then when I get to just below the bust area, I'm actually going to start my pattern. I haven't really decided what that pattern's going to consist of, because I do want some cables in there and I want to personalise it. So look at some of these sorts of different designs and think, what are the Cornish designs that I actually want in my Gansey? The other thing I am going to do, which was quite a traditional thing, was put my initials just after I finished the rib at the bottom. I'm going to put my initials in the stocking stitch using sort of pearl stitches to denote my initials and the date that I made it as well, because quite often that was where they would personalise these sweaters to actually make people sort of be able to identify who was wearing them. Particularly important for seafarers, because unfortunately, you know, it is a dangerous occupation, and particularly going back in time. So people used to sort of put those on there so that if something happened to their loved ones, they would be able to identify them if they unfortunately got washed up. So how I'm going to do that is work out my gauge and then use graph paper to plot out the size that I need to knit for mine. So I'm a 38-inch bust, so if I want sort of about 8 inches of ease, I need to get it to 46 inches. And sorry if I haven't done centimetres, my mind's not converting to centimetres that quickly. So I'm going to knit it to 46 inches and then plot that on a graph so that I know how many stitches to cast on to start with. So because I want to do a split hem, obviously I'll knit forward and back, do front and back, and then join in the round as soon as I've sort of done those bits. I'm going to do a proper length sleeve and probably do the moss stitch sort of finishing on my cuffs because I prefer that. I will be doing the diamond, and I will probably do the neckline, which has got sort of a slight sort of ruffle on it. I want it sort of to be fairly high, cover up my turkey neck, but also to keep me warm. I always find if I'm going to get cold, it's my neck that's going to make me feel cool. So that's how I'm going to go about designing mine. I'm going to finish this swatch and do the graph plotting, and then I am going to cast on. So by the next time I record one of these videos, I will have cast on. On the Cornish Knitters Flock, which is our online community, we have a number of people that are at the same stage as me. So we're working together. It's a year-long challenge, and the idea being is that we're going to help people design their own Ganseys, and many people have taken up the challenge, and we're going to help them with that sort of doing their gauge and then plotting it out and sort of creating their own design, and then through the long months of actually knitting it, because many people just give up because it's such a big knit. And I'm not going to knit on this sort of monogamously. This is going to be something that I pick up and do. I don't want it to become a chore. I want to enjoy it, and I want to love the end result that's totally mine. There are a couple of other books. Oh, well, there's lots of books, but two that I would recommend looking at if you are thinking of is this one, which is Knitting Ganseys by Beth Brown Reinsel. I might have said that wrong. That's got some really good patterns that you can use as a template in. So I would suggest looking at this one to actually help you design your own if you don't want to follow a distinct pattern. And Di Gilpin obviously has done this Gansey knitting source book, which has probably got more contemporary design. So if you don't fancy doing the really tight fabric and labouring away with 2 or 2.25mm needles, this is one that you might actually enjoy using. Because it's got some contemporary designs in it, it's got other options, and it also has other weights of yarn, so you don't have to use the really tiny needles either. So I hope you enjoyed hearing about my Gansey, a little bit about the history. Sorry for any background noise. I kept moving to try and keep it quiet, but it didn't work. But I am going to put a little bit of B-roll in at the end as well, because a lady called Maureen, and her husband Nigel actually wrote to me after I did my Twixmas video and sort of shared a poem that Nigel had written, and I wanted to share it with you because it was a poem written specifically for me, and it's such a lovely one. So right at the end I'm gonna put some B-roll up and let you listen to the poem and see if you liked it as much as I did. So thank you, Maureen and Nigel, I really appreciated it. My final thing is the giveaway, because in the Twixmas video I asked you to comment and tell me what you loved about Cornwall, and also what you were planning, if you were planning to knit a Gansey, and so many of you commented. It was lovely, and I'm so glad that I've inspired so many of you to think about knitting your own. And I will, as I said, I will share how I've gone about the design element in the next video and show you what I've done. I might even record me actually plotting it and show you what it's like once I've cast on. But so many of you responded with comments, and I am pleased to announce that the winner is Paper and Twine. This lady talked to me about her love of Cornwall, and it just reminded me of all the things that I loved about Cornwall, and she was obviously keen to knit her own Gansey too. So if you are Paper and Twine, please message me with your email or contact me on the email that's in the notes and tell me your email address and how much yarn you would like. Do consider when you're buying yarn, particularly thinking about these cones, they're 500 grams on these cones and there's about 1,000 meters. Because of the tight weave, you do need to go up in your meterage. So normally for me, I would take about 12 to 1300 meters to knit a sweater, but because of the dense fabric, I have actually ordered 2000 meters, because Ganseys are really yarn hungry. So do consider that if you are buying Gansey. There are a number of companies that produce Gansey yarns. We're using Frangipani or Blacker yarns in our sort of knit along on the flock. If you are interested in the flock as well, please do go onto our website and have a look. We love new members, so please think about coming to join us. It's not too late to get involved with the Gansey knit, for example. So I've ordered 2000 meters of this, but do think about that if you're ordering yarn to do it, because it is so yarn hungry, because you want that lovely dense fabric. So just a thought. But Paper and Twine, if you contact me, tell me what colour you'd like of the Frangipani and how much in meterage you would like, and I would be delighted to send it to you. So thank you for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. Do stay around and listen to my poem, and I can't wait to see you next time. Bye.
I am a Cornish knitter, a Cornish knitting girl. First I knits a knit, and then I knits a purl. Casting on and casting off, no fishing boats involved. My harbour's in the garden where problems are resolved. My arbour's where I anchor when life is getting choppy. It's where I knit my jumpers, both close-fitting or just floppy. Seed stitch, moss or garter, I think I've done them all. But Pharaoh's such a challenge, my brain just won't play ball. So now I'm doing Ganseys for Cornish fisher folk. But just for you, if so desired, I can also do bespoke. So sail with me on a knitting quest, and let us cruise together. No unpicked rows or tangled skeins, just tranquil knitting weather.